Hello, this is James Hunter, and this is my 2 Cents channel where I talk about topics from physical fitness, mental health, wellness, and topics I may just want to discuss. And yep, that was just a little bit of flexing there because why not? And I've been on a diet, so I'm kind of just going to be checking where I'm at anyways, as far as where I'm at, as far as leaning up, building myself up, and so on. But the focus of this video is going to be about nutrition, and more specifically, as the title indicates, is my nutrition as a teenager when I was an athlete and where I've come all those years ago and my evolution in terms of what my understanding of nutrition is, my relationship to food, what it does for me, not just for performance, but for my health, and how all that evolved throughout my life. I'll be 49 in just a few months. So it's really, I gotta laugh, when I think about, when I played sports back in the day, in grade school. I played football, ran track and field, and I did that from 7th grade on up to my senior year. And this is during a time, like a lot of you know who played sports, it's a very developmental time of your life. I know you're hitting puberty, you're starting to develop more, get stronger, and particularly if you're in football, especially football, some of the other sports, but not so much as football, you're in an off-season program. And every year that I played football in a small South Texas town in South Texas, they worked the hell out of us back then because they could get away with it. We had our first period athletics, but really, even though first period was technically 8 o'clock or 8:15, we had to be there like at 6:45 for roll call, and we started our workout by 7. And so we had a good 2 hours at least minimum working out in the mornings before we even started second period, right? And then after school, of course, there was a football practice. It feels during the off season from football, if you're on the football team, you were automatically enrolled in junior varsity track. So they could keep you after school for your track workout, but really what they did is they'd make the football players keep lifting weights all year round and do some running drills and so on. So because I was running track and field as well, to me this was not a big deal because I was going to, be competing in track. So I didn't necessarily resent that. But what I want to talk about is the physical demands that were placed, at least on my life, and a lot of you who are watching this video played sports, you can recall the type of physical demands that are placed on us in terms of the rigorous weightlifting programs, the types of football practices, in terms of the drills. And in South Texas, anyways, I'm not speaking for for other places, but South Texas, I'm sure it's hot in other parts of the country, but we're known for our hot weather. I mean, the humidity in August when the two-a-days would start, and then you'd go into September and so on all the way into your fall football season. The summer, August, September, heck, even October, could be, upwards close to 100 degrees sometimes. And we've had 100-degree days in my past. And even to this day, we'll occasionally climb on up there. So imagine being in full pads. It's that kind of weather. You're a teenager and so on. So why am I bringing all this up? The purpose of mentioning all this is because of, let's talk about nutrition now. Now, where I'm at with my understanding of nutrition and how I apply things like glycogen loading or carb loading, making sure that my macros are where they need to be to support my goals and needs of the body, calorie intake, estimated energy requirements, all these things that I've learned, throughout my adult life that I incorporate now. Back in the day, I was, came of age, I guess in the 80s, basically, is when I played football and track and field back in high school, in that time period. There was no really much information out there, at least in my neck of the woods, as far as, concepts about, that were being implemented anyways, as far as nutrition for athletes. I took sports nutrition in college, learned a lot. But back then, I remember for a varsity football team, on the Friday, they started giving football players just a little bit of spaghetti with the pasta, and that would be literally hours before the football game, and that was supposed to help. Well, what I learned over nutrition over the years is actually with carb loading and glycogen loading, you want to at least be starting a week before whatever the the target date is of when you're going to perform, whether it's running, marathons, a football game, and so on and so on. If you're playing football every week, then yeah, you're just going to need to be incorporating carbs on a daily. So back then, there really wasn't a lot of that going on with myself anyways. My parents didn't know anything about nutrition, and this was a time period when you started to see supplements become more prominent as far as advertisements with the Joe Weider magazines were around, but you started seeing more stuff like protein powders and stuff. But I don't remember a lot of carbohydrate supplements like we have today, and so on. Things that were for pre-workout and so on, or even things that were designed to augment or enhance performance. It's just basically maybe some protein powders and things like that, or weight gainers. So in South Texas, when I really think about like what was my nutrition, and I try to put some pieces together in terms of on days I had energy and I felt strong and good, versus on days where I was dragging ass, I just didn't seem to have any energy. So let me talk about what my diet was back then. Growing up in South Texas, anyone who's from Texas, not all of Texas, up north they don't have Whataburger. But here in South Texas, we got Whataburger everywhere, okay? Basically, it's a hamburger place. It's like a staple around here as far as been around since I've existed. And it's basically they have all types of hamburgers, double meat, triple meat, cheeseburger, make them how you want, and so on. They have taquitos and other items on their menu, but are basically known for their hamburgers. So our football team, we would stop, after the football game for Whataburger, right? During the week, for lunch at high school, it was optional if you want to eat in the cafeteria or not. We'd go eat Whataburger. So, this was like, football players and other athletes in other sports during the year, we're eating stuff like Whataburgers. Basically, you got your meat, your cheese, and the bun is bread, and bread's not the best carbohydrate, or, if you want to look at it that way, as far as for, performance, or if you're trying to keep the glycogen levels in the muscle where it needs to be for performance. Another thing that I ate a lot of were taquitos. So taquitos, for those of you who are not from Texas or South Texas, it's like you go to a Mexican food restaurant, and I'm not talking Taco Bell or anything like that. I'm talking taquitos, where it's think of homemade rolled tortillas, where they make them from scratch, and you have different things like chorizo and egg, carne asada taquito. You can have bacon and eggs, bacon and sausage, machacado. There's lots of taquitos. You get the idea. So breakfast, you'd see a lot of football players in the morning coming with their taquitos. I lived in the town where there's a lot of Hispanic people, and I'm half Hispanic myself. My dad was white, my mom was Hispanic. So my mom knew how to make that stuff too. So we would come in and have them rolled in tinfoil back then, and they would be there. We wouldn't eat them before our first period workout. We would be throwing that up, but we would come in, do our workout, and right before our second period, we'd be eating those taquitos because we were like starving after, having our asses worked off in the morning doing the circuit training. So that was another thing. A lot of taquitos, Mexican food, and Whataburger, right? At home, I might eat something like a plate of carne asada, and they sometimes have rice, maybe the good old steak and potatoes, right? I get that occasionally. But these meals, a lot of time it was convenience or just, desire. As a kid, teenager, I like hamburgers, right? I'm going to go eat that. And sometimes in the house, both my parents worked. My mom may not always cook. Maybe there was a pizza ordered, right? Not a lot of protein on a pizza. It's just carbs and fats. So there was no strategy, in other words. It was kind of like I ate what was put in front of me at home. What was convenient during the day. I know these days you generally think of a gram of protein per pound of body weight, and less depending on how much you weigh. I have a whole other thought on that in a different video I'll share. But when I think back to then, that time period where I was very physically active, lifting weights, playing football, there's a lot of demand being placed on me back then as a young person. I even wonder if I even got a gram of protein per pound of body weight, when I think about it. So part of why I'm making this video is that when I think about that time period, it's a testimony to the power of our youth and the resilience of young people and the resilience of my youth. Because there are some days when I really felt like I felt strong, whether it's during our workouts and so on. Those were probably typically the days where I probably had some rice or potatoes at home with my dinner and so on. And then other times of the week, maybe I just didn't have the same energy level or feel as strong on those particular days. I wouldn't be surprised if those were days where I wasn't getting any kind of quality complex carb. I might have just been mostly protein and fat almost. And so this relationship between the days when I was getting adequate carbohydrate intake from a good enough complex carbohydrate, that also, if the protein intake, is a lot to be said for that. I think about back then, I was pretty strong for my weight. And so, the diet that I had, while it might not have been a planned one or thought out for the purpose of performance at what it was, it obviously was enough for me to do what I did back then as an athlete. I think about creatine monohydrate. So I had enough red meat in my diet back then. So yeah, I was getting enough creatine monohydrate, I would imagine. These days, I don't eat very much red meat, if at all. I'm like chicken breast, fish, turkey, and so on. So I will occasionally supplement creatine monohydrate as an adult. I don't do it all the time. And my strength stays pretty good nevertheless. But I do notice a difference when I get a little more creatine monohydrate. So back then, yeah, it's just crazy when I think about everything that they put us through in South Texas football back in the 80s. Back then it was a different mindset. Coming up, there wasn't a lot of political correctness. None of this, cupcake, mamsy-pamsy, worried about hurting your feelings stuff. No, I mean, it was serious business back then, and the coaches they didn't treat us like teenagers. They treated us like young men, and they expected us to be tough and so on. So, that experience growing up and going through all that, it had a lot of transferable things to my life that have made me stronger, and part of it has made me the person I am, having played sports growing up. So back to the nutrition aspect, I really think a lot about that back then. I mean, like I said it earlier, there was no plan. It's just ate whatever mom and dad had on the table. I remember one summer, it was actually it was my junior year, the summer before my junior year, 2-a-day football season. And my dad had just changed. He was like kind of having to get a different job. He's gonna, had a business that was kind of like the economy was bad. And so anyways, that was kind of like thin times, if you will. And I remember for a few weeks, I mean, there was like, I was like eating these packages that had pretzels and cheese sticks in them. And because we had a bunch of those in this big old box, and I was like, well, shit, I'll eat that. So I was eating cheese and pretzels for a period of time, and then tried to scrounge up whatever to maybe get back then it was less than $1 maybe for a taco or something like that. So those were some pretty thin times that one summer, and I remember even walking to football practice a few times just to get there a few miles and then do the practice, and then not even have an adequate carbohydrate load in, I'm pretty sure, and then just I didn't even have sufficient calories to meet the demands of what they were putting us on at that time every day like I needed to. So some of those times were pretty tough in terms of the nutritional support that I had for my situation at that time of what my family was going through at that time. So I think about all that, but as a kid, you're not necessarily putting two and two together all the time. Like, man, it's important that I eat good. So as I got older and got to where I had more resources because I worked and I could make my own money and have more decision making over what I want to put in my body, I learned a lot more. As far as okay, I need to have enough protein intake if I'm lifting weights. For the recovery of the muscles that are being put under stress, they need to repair. Right? You think about branched chain amino acids, the protein synthesis. You can talk about other things, nitrogen balance and all that. But yeah, all these things, I started to think about that as an adult and strategically started eating for my needs. So I'll put some pictures up here in my early 20s where I was still kind of eating better, but I didn't really have an appreciation yet for needing to bring that carbohydrate down if I really wanted to get ripped. I looked pretty good, but I still had a little bit of smoothness when I was actually training for a bodybuilding contest in my early 20s. But I think y'all get the idea. I'm not sure everyone's situation here. There might be people watching this video that are teenagers right now, and your situation's different because of the time that we live in. It's different these days. There's a lot more awareness, education, a lot more information that's put out there with YouTube, for example, the internet. You can learn a lot about nutrition, and if you have the information and you're organized enough, it's not too expensive to eat according to your needs. If you're cooking your own food and going to the grocery store, which is what I pretty much do, as far as my situation. So These days, I've actually helped some high school kids stay in shape over the summer for football, and typically a lot of these young men these days, they know about supplements. They understand the importance of protein. Um, they even talk about concepts like glycogen loading, carbohydrate loading. They're already thinking about that at a very young age because it's very ingrained or a part of our culture now because of fitness and just everything that's put out there. So part of it's the supplement industry, marketing that they do. A lot of it is content that you see on YouTube, people talking about the importance of nutrition. So I will say this, I am thankful that, I made it through all that, and I'm here where I'm at today, that I have a better understanding. Always continue to learn what you can, and keep on learning as far as fitness and health and nutrition and those types of things. And with me, with my situation, because I've been on diets enough times, I know it works for me. If I want to get lean and be 1% body fat, or if I want to bulk up and get big, if I want to have a lot of energy, or for power, if I'm training for powerlifting purposes, like I'm going to do a powerlifting meet this year too, then yeah, my nutrition is going to be a bit different in terms of how much carbohydrate I'm taking in versus if I'm just training only for a bodybuilding contest, which I'm doing that this year too. But they're both going to be spread far enough apart to where it's not going to be an issue or a problem. So anyways, how many people watching this video, if you're my age, almost 49, some of you may be older than that, and if you played sports, I'm not sure what your situation was. Maybe it was totally different from mine. Maybe you had some mentors or some really smart people around you that kind of promoted things about nutrition. I'm not saying that it wasn't out there. It's just that you got to understand, when I grew up, there was no internet. That maybe you might, if you had a bodybuilding magazine, you might, read a little bit about nutrition and so on. But it really wasn't as out there as it is now in terms of the availability and how easy it is to get that information as compared to back in my day. So what was your situation for some of y'all? Do you remember going through football practice and brutal off-season workouts and so on, and just doing it off of cheeseburgers or tacos or just whatever your parents threw on the table and you ate it, because that's just the way it was, you eat what you got, or don't eat at all. But you made do with it. You did the best you could, and you came out of it, and you survived, right? And then you got older, and you're like, well, holy shit, wow, I know a lot more now. And as the old adage or saying goes, if I would have known back then what I know today, right, how much better or better of a situation it may have been. So anyways, those are just my thoughts on my nutrition as a teenage athlete, and also just throughout my life, and how that kind of changed and evolved as I got older, and where I'm at now, and I reflect and look back. What I am thankful for is that I do have the information now. I know how to eat according to my needs. I know how to reach my goals, and still young enough to where, yeah, I can still compete at things and challenge myself, and enjoy it, and just, see the results of my application of knowledge and just hard training and hard work. So if this video got you to think maybe about some of your eating habits when you were young, you didn't, just eating kind of like what was there, and where you're at today, maybe you're still learning and shifting, your ideas about food. If this video got you to think, like the video, I appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'd appreciate that too. I appreciate the support. I'm going to continue making videos on topics from physical fitness, mental health and wellness, and so on, topics of interest. And I'm also working on doing some videos on just, some exercise tips and some suggestions, things out of the gyms that I train out of. So until I make another video, y'all take care. Have a nice day. And here's another shameless bicep shot.